We imagine the sacred as distant, a golden light beyond the clouds, a temple guarded by silence, a vision granted only to saints and mystics. Yet Meister Eckhart whispered something radically different, that the divine hides in the smallest cracks of life, waiting to be noticed. What if the cathedral is not a place, but the air between your hands? What if the incense of worship is the smell of rain on the street, the steam rising from your morning cup, the sound of someone breathing beside you? To find God in all things is not to shrink the infinite into the ordinary, but to realize that the ordinary has never been separate from the infinite. The beam of sunlight slipping through the blinds is not a symbol of divine presence, it is divine presence. The touch of fabric against your skin, the rhythm of footsteps on the ground, the quiet pulse behind your ribs, each is a doorway that requires no pilgrimage, only a certain kind of attention. But attention is not easy. Our minds are conditioned to overlook what has always been here, searching instead for peaks and spectacles. We seek revelations in the extraordinary, while brushing past the unshakable miracle of this moment. The flower in the corner is ignored because it blooms without announcing itself. The breeze on our cheek is dismissed because it is too soft to demand our notice. Yet, as Eckhart reminds us, God does not shout. God whispers in everything that is. Consider the grain of wood beneath your fingertips. It holds the memory of sun and rain, of roots pressing into dark soil, of wind shaping its trunk. To feel it is to touch a history written without words, a testament to the patient artistry of the divine. The sacred does not belong only to ritual, though ritual can be a vessel. It is not limited to Scripture, though Scripture can be a map. It moves through every breath you take, every sound you hear, every step you walk. And perhaps the reason we fail to see it is not because it is hidden too well, but because it is too close as your own heartbeat, as intimate as your own thoughts. Eckhart once said that if the only prayer you ever say is thank you, it will be enough. Gratitude is not merely politeness toward the divine. It is the recognition that nothing is devoid of divine life. To give thanks is to see with the eyes of the soul, to bow not only before altars, but before every fragment of existence. Yet there is a paradox. The moment you turn your attention to finding God in all things, the search itself can become an obstacle. To strain for the sacred is to reinforce the illusion that it is somewhere else. The practice is less about reaching than about softening, less about grasping than about receiving what is already pouring into you moment by moment. If every instant is a threshold, then perhaps holiness is not rare, but constant. The question is not whether the divine is here, but whether we are. And so we begin to suspect that the distance between the profane and the sacred is measured only by the quality of our seeing, which raises a deeper question, one that will guide us further. If God is in all things, what changes when all things are seen as God? If God is in all things, what changes when all things are seen as God? Perhaps it is not the world that changes, but the eyes through which the world is met. The same street, the same walls, the same weathered faces, yet something subtle has shifted. What once appeared dull now shimmers. What once was overlooked now radiates an unseen depth. The familiar is a veil. It covers the miracle of existence with the thin fabric of habit. We see the same tree each morning, and after a time, it is no longer a tree. It is a label, a routine image, an object already known. The living reality of it fades behind the name we've given it. And yet, Meister Eckhart suggests that the divine pulse has never ceased flowing through that tree, through the soil that holds it, through the air that touches its leaves. To pierce the veil is not to gain new information. It is to see without the film of expectation. It is the kind of seeing a child knows before language hardens the world into fixed shapes. It is the gaze that recognizes the extraordinary in the ordinary, not because the ordinary has changed, but because the mind has stepped aside long enough to witness what was always there. We are accustomed to seeking the divine in places of heightened beauty, the crest of a mountain, the silence of a monastery, the wide horizon over an unbroken sea. But what if the greater challenge and the greater grace lies in finding God in a cluttered kitchen, in the sound of traffic outside your window, in the face of a stranger who will never know your name? The sacred hides in the simple, not to deceive us, but to draw us into intimacy. In the desert tradition, there is the saying that God is a subtle thief, stealing into the heart when least expected. A cup placed back on the shelf, a door opening to let in a breeze, the steam rising from a bowl of soup. Each act, each moment is both entirely mundane and utterly holy, depending only on the quality of presence we bring to it. Presence is the quiet revolution. It interrupts the inertia of habit and restores the freshness of perception. To be present with a single breath is to stand at the altar of the living God without moving an inch. To be present with a single act, even one as small as tying a shoelace, is to consecrate it. And yet, presence is fragile. It slips through our fingers the moment we try to grasp it. It can only be lived, not possessed. In this, the divine in the ordinary is both a promise and a discipline. It asks us to loosen our grip on how we think life should appear, so we may receive it as it is. Consider the hands of someone working, sweeping a floor, folding laundry, repairing a shoe. To the hurried eye, there is nothing remarkable, but to the eye that has slowed enough to see, there is rhythm, devotion, and a quiet artistry. It is there, in the uncelebrated motions, that divinity rests like a hidden flame. Perhaps this is why so many of the mystics speak not of fleeing the world, but of sinking into it more deeply. Not to lose themselves in its noise, but to hear the silent hymn beneath it. They know that the threshold to the sacred is not guarded by walls of stone, but by the simple act of noticing. The veil of the familiar grows thinner when the mind is still. In that stillness, a doorway opens, not into some distant heaven, but into the here that has always been heaven in disguise. And if we were to live this way, seeing God in the sink's slow drip, in the worn handle of a door, in the shadow cast by a lamp, what would happen to the boundaries we keep between sacred and profane?
Perhaps in dissolving those boundaries, something even more radical would be revealed.
Perhaps, in dissolving the boundaries between sacred and profane, we find that there were never two realms to begin with. The separation was an invention of the mind, a habit of dividing what is whole. The earth has always been the altar. The breath has always been the prayer. The moment you are living now has always been the sanctuary. When the mind ceases to label, the world begins to speak. Not in the language of words, but in the silent eloquence of being. The grain of wood in a tabletop, the scent of rain on stone, the warm weight of bread in the hand, all of it speaks the same truth. Nothing is too small for God to dwell within. This is not a truth to be grasped by effort. It is not a task for the will to complete. It is a remembering, like waking from a long forgetfulness. Meister Eckhart taught that we need not seek God as if God were absent, but rather remove the obstructions in our seeing. The divine does not need to arrive, only our awareness does. In the stillness, you may notice how life is continually offering itself to you, each moment a gift unwrapped the instant it appears. And yet, how often do we turn away, chasing a more perfect moment somewhere else? We overlook the miracle because it wears the clothes of the ordinary. But when the eyes are clear, even the most worn fabric is woven with gold. The mystics speak of the marriage of heaven and earth, but perhaps it is not a distant wedding to await. It is the constant vow renewed each time a leaf falls, each time a laugh escapes, each time your hand touches another's in quiet kindness. Heaven is not above, nor is it beyond. It leans close, brushing its lips against the dust of daily life. This is why the smallest acts matter. How you close a door, how you listen when someone speaks, how you set down a cup. Each gesture can be a sacrament when offered with awareness. Each breath can be the meeting place of the eternal and the fleeting. And so, to live in the awareness of God in all things is not to flee the world, but to inhabit it more deeply. To see that every step is taken on holy ground. To realize that the sacred is not an occasional visitor. It is the ground, the air, the heartbeat of all that exists. In this light, there is no ordinary moment. Every moment is the first, and every moment is the last. Every moment is the infinite, folding itself into form for your eyes alone. When you leave here and return to your life, you will encounter dishes to be washed, doors to be opened, errands to be run. Nothing in their appearance will have changed. And yet, if you see with the eyes we have spoken of, you will know that the hands that wash, the feet that walk, and the mind that notices all are already within the presence they sought. The world will not announce this truth. It will only offer it again and again until you learn to see. And when you do, you may find that the distance between you and the divine has vanished, leaving only this, a life luminous in its simplicity, radiant in its nearness, vast in its smallest details. If this reflection has stirred something in you, let it ripple outward. Share it and remain close. There is more to walk through together, more to see, and more to remember.